Imagine you're scrolling through Amazon reviews, like you do, looking for your next purchase, only to discover later that some of those sarcastic, chilling comments were written by a serial killer. Today, we're diving into the story of a man who lived a double life. He was a real estate agent and a kidnapper and a cold-blooded murderer and a sexual assaulter. Yeah, so I guess that's more than a double life. Friends, this is Cold-Blooded Serial. I am your host and true crime bestie, Tika, and today's episode is about Todd Kohlhepp, the Amazon review killer. And friends, this episode is a two-parter. This is part one, and today we're going to discuss Todd's childhood, his teenage years, and his young adult life. And when I tell you it is crazy, yes, it is crazy. As always, I love to indulge you with a good backstory. So, let's start. Todd Kohlhepp was born as Todd Christopher Samsel on March 7th, 1971 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He was raised in both South Carolina and Georgia. Todd's father, William Samsel, a military veteran, divorced his mother, Regina Tague, in 1973 after 4 years of marriage, when Todd was only 2 years old. Regina was like, you know what, I'm not wasting any time. And she remarried when Todd was 3. Then, at the age of 5, Todd's stepfather, Carl Kohlhepp, adopted him into the family with his 2 children. Now, Todd is officially a Kohlhepp, which I'm sure Carl is probably like, that was the worst decision I have ever made. Now, this psychopath has our last name. We're not technically related. I wasn't married to his mom consistently. And now every time someone hears the name Kohlhepp, they're going to think about Todd and all of his horrible acts. His mom and stepdad later divorced and then remarried and then divorced again and then remarried several more times during Todd's childhood. So not a very stable childhood at all. But records show that as a child, Todd exhibited violent behavior towards animals and other children. And friends, what do we know about kids who exhibit violent behavior towards animals? Pretty much every serial killer starts off by being violent towards animals. So yeah, Todd was no exception. Friends, you guys are probably thinking that Todd is around 10 or 11, maybe even 13, right? No. He began to display his evil nature in nursery school. And for all of those who don't know or don't have children, they're between the ages of like 3 and 6 and absolutely adorable. However, Todd was not adorable. He was actually known to be aggressive towards other children and would destroy their property. Then, at the age of 9, he started going to a counselor, and the counselor described him as being explosive and preoccupied with sexual content. The FBI claimed that Todd was abused, abandoned, and bullied by his own family, which is why he was like this. But I don't know. I didn't find a lot of information that would back that up. So I'm guessing maybe the FBI talked to him and was like, okay, that's probably why, but I don't know. The FBI thinks this because there were stories that Todd's grandfather had used a cattle prod to hit him at a young age, and instead of speaking out, Todd seemingly developed pent-up rage that would often explode whenever someone pushed his buttons. Ultimately, he was sent to a mental facility at 9 years old because Todd became very angry and combative. So, that's who we're dealing with right now. Friends, I didn't give you an example of how he was cruel to animals in every article that I read about Todd's childhood. they all mentioned this. Todd once shot a dog with a BB gun. He also dropped his goldfish into a bottle of bleach because he was trying to punish his mom for buying him a goldfish and not the gerbil that he actually wanted. So, yeah, we're dealing with someone who was probably born evil. I mean, if his grandfather really did beat him with a cattle prod at a young age, that's extremely sad. And the grandfather should have been punished accordingly at that time. But it's not an excuse to grow up and become the monster that you become. Throughout his childhood, Todd expressed anger toward his stepfather. I guess it got so bad that in 1982, when he was 12 years old, his mom and stepdad separated again. And his mom was like, Todd, I can't deal with you. I'm going to send you to Arizona to go live with your biological father. Friends, the crazy thing about that statement is that Todd has not seen his father in 8 years. So it's like sending your son to go live with a complete stranger because you're 12 and you haven't seen him since you were 4. His mother said that she did that because she believed that her son's problems stemmed from him never knowing his father. So she felt that she was doing what was best. Clearly, Todd wasn't respecting his stepfather, so who best to raise their son besides the biological father? He goes to Arizona for the summer, and when he returns to South Carolina, he tells his mom, he's like, hey, you need to send me back to Arizona. Like, I loved it there. You really need to send me back, or I'm going to unalive myself or unalive you if you don't send me back. Now, friends, that's a heck of a threat. Like, both of those are very extreme. And I don't think that those are a normal response to when a kid wants something. Like, why can't you just be like, hey, mom, I'm growing into manhood. You know, I'm in puberty right now. I want to go live with my dad. Boom, problem solved. But he's like, nah, I'm threatening you, life or death. You send me back, okay? So, needless to say, he ends up going back to live with his biological father in Arizona the following school year in 1983. When he moved to Arizona, he began using his father's last name and went by Todd Samsel. The Samsel men, their relationship started off great. Everything's going well. They're bonding over their shared love of collecting weapons. And his dad even taught his son how to blow things up and make bombs. For a person like Todd, this is the life. My dad and I are out back shooting or going hunting. We're blowing shit up. Like, this is great. However, for the Samsel men, their happy time quickly deteriorated because Todd claimed that his father was always absent due to the amount of time he spent with his numerous girlfriends, often leaving Todd at home alone to go out of town with these various women. This made Todd feel lonely. He began repeatedly asking his mom to return to South Carolina, but she's like, nah, I'm good here. A boy needs to be with their dad. She continued to make excuses as to why he couldn't come and why he needed to stay in Arizona. So now it's October 1986. Todd, who still lives in Arizona, is about 15 years old. He goes to a neighbor's house where his 14-year-old classmate, Christy Granado, lived. And he knocks on the door and he's like, hey, Christy, I need you to come out because your boyfriend wants to speak with you. So Christy's probably like, oh yeah, Todd's a neighbor. I'm not thinking that anything's gonna happen. And honestly, who could blame her? Because you're not thinking that the worst thing that could ever happen to you is going to happen. And poor Christy opens her door, and once she's outside, Todd holds a gun to Christy's head and forces her into his house, which was only 3 homes away. Once inside the house, Todd tied Christy's hands up with rope, he put tape over her mouth, and he sexually assaulted her. After the attack, he walked Christy back home and threatened to kill her, her younger brother, and her sister if she shared what happened. Friends, he was 15 years old. This is a very evil thing to do. One source said that although Christy Granado initially feared for her family, she did speak out about what happened, and Todd Kohlhepp was found and arrested within hours of the attack. Another source said that someone else had called the police, that they arrived at Todd's father's house, saw him with a rifle pointed to the ceiling, and then called the authorities. Todd's dad told authorities that at the time he was away on a business trip to Nebraska and had enlisted the help of a friend to check on his son, and that the only emotion his son was capable of was anger and madness. When he was arrested by the police said that his first response was, "How much time am I going to get for this?" And then when they asked why he did what he did, he said it was out of anger and rebellion toward his father. The more the police spoke to him, the more obvious it became there was something disturbing about him. The police officers immediately ordered a psychiatric evaluation, where Todd was ultimately diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and an above-average IQ of 118. Once the trial started, Todd was charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and committing a dangerous crime against children. But, according to court records, after he pleaded guilty to kidnapping and was sentenced to 15 years in prison, the other charges were dropped. Yes, friends, the crimes of sexual assault and committing a dangerous crime against children were dropped. It's like, honestly, I don't care if he pled guilty or not. You need to show what he did. On January 19th, 1987, Arizona Judge Rose Kimball ordered that Todd Kohlhepp's case be transferred out of the juvenile system because his offenses had been committed in an aggressive, violent, obviously premeditated, and willful manner, according to the court documents. Judge Rose Kimball said, at less than the age of 9, this juvenile was impulsive, explosive, and preoccupied with sexual content. He has not changed. He has been unabatedly aggressive to others and destructive of property since nursery school. He destroys his own clothing, personal possessions, and pets, apparently on whim and caprice. Approximately 6 years of intervention and 15 years of life have resulted in abysmal failure. 25 months of the most intensive and expensive professional intervention, short of God's will, provides no protection for the public and no rehabilitation of this juvenile by any services or facilities presently available to the juvenile court. And Judge Rose Kimball sentenced Todd Kohlhepp to 15 years imprisonment without the possibility of parole on January 19th, 1987, which is exactly 30 years from his next major court appearance, scheduled for January 19th, 2017. Isn't that kismet? In a letter dated January 9th, 1987, the parents of the 14-year-old girl, Christy Granado, wrote to Judge Kimball about how terrified their entire family was of Todd. They said, "We live in great fear of him. We hope that you will do all you can to protect our family, as well as the rest of the community, from any further actions on his part." Friends, before his 1987 sentencing, his mom wrote to an adult probation officer in a plea for leniency. She wrote that her son had put his biological father on a pedestal and took everything his father said as absolute truth. His mom wrote that the incident, the crime against Christy, the mom is calling an incident, okay? His mom wrote that the incident had brought she and her son closer together, as Todd wrote her regularly from jail. She said, "You know, it's strange. Maybe a little good does come from some bad." Friends, what the heck? Is she just freaking delusional? That's not even the worst of her delusions. So the mom continues in her letter to the parole officer. She's like, they didn't stop to think that he even walked the girl home. Does that sound like a dangerous criminal? He even walked the girl home. Regina, like, did you not hear what he did to this poor, innocent 14-year-old girl? If one delusional letter wasn't enough, she wrote another letter on August 6, 1987. And she says, I realize that he has done wrong, and my heart aches for the little girl, but it also aches for my son. He was only 15 years old. He didn't have any record of any kind and had never been in trouble before, which is a total lie. Although he hasn't been in this type of trouble, he was in enough trouble to be put into a psychiatric center because he couldn't get along with kids and he was hurting animals. So yeah, it might not be the same type of trouble, not trouble to have him arrested, but yeah, he was troubled. She continues, Todd knows he did wrong and he's sorry, but they, I'm guessing she's talking about the court system, they won't even give him a chance to make a good life out of this. Everyone deserves a second chance. No, they don't. Not everybody deserves a second chance. Sometimes one chance is plenty. The adult probation officer, I don't know if they respond back to his mom, but the adult probation officer actually writes that Todd Kohlhepp was the type of individual, one with little or no conscience, who presents the greatest risk to the community. That 1987 case landed Todd Kohlhepp on the sex offender registry, the 14 years that he actually spent in adult prison, which included credit for time he had already spent in jail leading up to his prison sentence, was eventful at first. 2 months after he was admitted, he was cited for disobeying an order. This was the first of 7 violations that included some violent behavior over the course of the first year, including fighting, striking a person, and destroying property. 3 years later, when he was 20, he was cited for 2 nonviolent disciplinary infractions, which were stealing and being absent. While he was in prison, he began vocational training in computer programming and ended up earning his bachelor's degree in computer science from Central Arizona College. Friends, for a decade until his release, there was no record of disobedience. Once he was released in November 2001, at the age of 30, he moved back to South Carolina to be closer to his mom. And by 2008, Todd had another degree, this time in business administration marketing. Everything appeared to be falling into place. And friends, this is where I leave you. Stay tuned for part 2 of the Todd Kohlhepp story, the Amazon review killer. As always, stay safe. I'll talk to you later. Bye.